not specific to January. And when we think of January, usually it comes with this feeling of new beginning. And that new beginning starts to wear off in February and March, and then halfway through the year, a lot of times the intentions that we set at the start of the year are completely out the window, or an afterthought. At the end of this year, I did a silent meditation retreat somewhere in random Oklahoma, in Bristow, Oklahoma, off of Route 66. And when it came time to reflect on what the theme was for 2023, it required some thought. It wasn't necessarily front and center. So last year, one of the things that we did to help cement and root the intention for ourselves is having the silence-ish meditation retreat here at United Life. And Al led a silent painting workshop. And so people were invited to paint their theme and have it so that you can have it in your house. And that was why I was able to recall what both of our themes were, because there was a painting that was in the house at some point. We got rid of it, which is why it wasn't right at the top of my mind. But I do the best that I can to live consciously from this understanding. And as many of you know, Reverend mentioned this last week, that the annual theme of Grand Rising came out of an experience that I had at CSUN Youth Services here. So being able to recognize the value of being reminded to start each day with a Grand Rising beyond January. The fact that the Global Themes team recognized the value of both living consciously from that intention, but also of leading into a phrase that is associated with the Black community. And to be honest, as a Black-ish person, as a half-Black person, somebody who presents as Black out in the world, I obviously suggested the theme, so as a Black person, I didn't have a problem with it, but I understood that there was a possibility, as of yet, it hasn't been an issue, but I understood that there was a possibility that the theme of Grand Rising could be thought of as cultural appropriation. And my way of looking at it was saying, let's talk about it. Instead of actively choosing an annual theme that does not put the Black community or even any kind of marginalized group at front and center. When we're saying we are leaning into and celebrating this group within our organization, what it means to live as oneness means that we're not just solely operating from a European-centric standard, a heteronormative-centric standard, but what we're doing is we're expanding the idea. And so even though the vast majority, I shouldn't even say the vast majority, I don't actually know these numbers. I suspect, based on having attended Centers for Spiritual Living conferences, that the majority of leaders within our movement are white, and likely, I've seen these numbers, that the majority of leaders within our movement are over 60. So to highlight a phrase like Grand Rising, that is something that comes out of the young and the Black community, it's different, has a different vibe than I was going to say Spirit Uncensored, than what the Centers for Spiritual Living is usually associated with. Spirit Uncensored, very much. Grand Rising totally fits in for Spirit Uncensored. And part of my desire, my intention around advocating for Grand Rising, using a statement like that, one is good versus grand. When you got a choice between these two words, which one feels like it has more power? Good or grand?
Grand.
Great, of course. And morning, it is, yes, okay, right now it is morning. It's like saying good night, it's acknowledging this is the time of day. But what happens in the morning, we don't say like grand breakfast, it's recognizing that each person who was alive every single day had to rise in some way, even if it's just simply opening their eyes. That each person starts a day, I don't care what's happening outside, whether it is nighttime or daytime, whatever lifestyle somebody is living, but what happens at some point over the course of the day, we rest and then we rise. So to start each day with a that also serves as a greeting, to me was an incredibly powerful experience. And it also hasn't fully permeated the Black community. It isn't as if Black folks have been using Grand Rising for decades and we're suddenly coming on board with it. This is a relatively new phenomena that's still pretty much reserved to the TikTok space and spiritual Black communities. It's associated with spiritual Black spaces as opposed to all Black spaces. And so to me, my belief was that it does not count as appropriation. It was something that was posed by a Black person. There were other Black people on this team. But at the same time, I still think that just because I believe it and the other Black people on the team don't believe that it's appropriation, doesn't mean that it's not worth talking about. It doesn't mean that if there is a Black person anywhere in the Centers for Spiritual Living that says, I believe that this is cultural appropriation, that they're wrong. It just means that instead of avoiding conversations like this and leaning into what is safe, what is comfortable, what we have always done, does not move us forward at all. So this is a new day. Today's theme is a new day. It is this recognition that we are not restricted to living life with a good morning, that we get to start each day conscious of the fact that we are experiencing, that we are living a Grand Rising. And today in particular, I love that my Sunday, I speak on the second Sunday of every month, I love that my Sunday just happens to fall on Martin Luther King's birthday. I've never actually had an opportunity to speak on this day during this weekend. And as somebody, I think we all have, either those of us who lived, who were alive at the time that Martin Luther King was alive, and those of us like me who weren't around to see it, but got to experience the impact of what came after. It wasn't just him. The civil rights movement is where it is. He was not the only person creating and engaging change, but he's kind of become the face of what change looks like, of what inclusion looks like, of what equality looks like. And we are living at a time where his legacy is celebrated. However, at the time that Martin Luther King was alive, his experience was not nearly as celebratory. And I noticed in my education of the civil rights movement, no one ever said that. No minister, no teacher, no one ever acknowledged the fact that this man, we all know he was assassinated, so obviously he was a controversial figure at the time, but nobody really acknowledges how controversial he was at that time. It wasn't actually truly celebrated. This man was constantly thrown in jail, really advocating and fighting not only for his own freedom, but for the freedom of Black folks in America. So Martin Luther King said, the ultimate measure ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy. And in this new day that we are living in, there's challenge, there's controversy. I could be one of those ministers who stands on the stage and only talks about the science of mind, who says, and even the concept of only talking about the science of mind, I can choose to recognize that the science of mind is designed to apply to the concept of challenge and controversy. That the science of mind, what we talk about when we turn away from the condition, let's use a condition like mass incarceration, because it's Martin Luther King's birthday. Mass incarceration is a social issue that I believe that if Martin Luther King Jr. was alive today, he would actively be having those conversations and those discussions. At the time of the civil rights movement, 25% of incarcerated people in the world were not in the United States. The United States' current incarceration numbers really exploded in the 1980s. And since then, no one's really talked about it. And I think the reason we don't talk about it is when we think about people in prison, it's because they did something wrong, right? Like, a lot of us know what it's like. I talked about last month about my car being broken into. A lot of us know what it's like to be a quote-unquote victim of than there were enslaved people when slavery was legal. And that's just a statistic we don't hear. When I read that book in the New Jim Crow years ago, I didn't hear it. And so it was the first time that I heard it, and it really stuck with me. In this book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander writes, if we say to ourselves that the problem of mass incarceration is just too big, too daunting for us to do anything about, history will judge us harshly. Challenge and controversy. So, doing anything, what is anything? What does it mean to do anything? I wore my Prayer is a Superpower shirt because prayer is doing something, right? And we've talked a lot, not just us, the world has had these conversations about thoughts and prayers, that when something happens in the world, we say, all right, I'm going to pray about it. Thoughts and prayers. And what I believe comes out of prayer is Spirit's response. That prayer is a conversation. We might have let Spirit know or put out in the universe consciously and intentionally. We might speak a healing prayer around the mass incarceration system, but it's also listening to what is ours to do. And that might be something like we come across some kind of advocate or some kind of march or a event that's occurring, and Spirit says to us, maybe this is something that I should go to. Maybe this is something that I should send $5 to. Whatever it may be, that the concept of prayer is a two-way street. It is both letting the universe know what change we'd like to see and also being open and receptive to hearing what Spirit tells us is ours to do. So what I heard Spirit tell me is, don't run from this. I can feel shame around the fact that I didn't have this information, that I didn't have, that I wasn't informed about this until I read The New Jim Crow, or I can use my voice to find moments where it's appropriate to bring visibility to this issue. And I know that the few people in this room are not about to change the mass incarceration system on a global or even federal level, but I do know that ignoring it or pretending that it doesn't exist is not what is mine to do. What is mine to do is to recognize that speaking up, that sharing light, shedding light, recognizing that this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, means that we speak truth, that we don't choose to allow history to judge us harshly, but to know that we did individually whatever it is that we were called to do to create change. Now, mass incarceration may not be the thing, may not be, it's like, oh yeah, you can have your own idea and your own understanding of it. I'm not standing here saying, this is something you all need to change your relationship to. I am saying that what is mine to do is to speak about it. What is mine to do is to acknowledge that if Martin Luther King Jr. was alive today, he would probably speak about it. And the reason I feel like this is mine to do is because I don't hear anyone anywhere I go saying it. So it's something that I feel like needs to be said. I have an opportunity to stand on the stage and say it. So that's what's happening. That's what I'm doing. The other thing that I'm doing is actively participating in healing discussions and identifying more about what is mine to do and how to create the shift in the world, how to co-create a world that works for everyone, which is the Centers for Spiritual Living tagline. So there is a book study for the book called The Four Pivots by Dr. Sean Ginwright. And Dr. Sean Ginwright is also the keynote speaker at the upcoming conference in February. I'm serving on a panel to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion at that event. So I'm excited about that, and also grateful to have an opportunity to hear Dr. Sean Ginwright after participating in this book study. So in the book, The Four Pivots, Dr. Sean Ginwright says, dealing with our addictions, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts is way harder than making people aware of the dangers of climate change or fighting against racist policies. I put this in here because I wanted to note that the best way to change the world, to co-create a world that works for everyone, starts with us individually. That it is a twofold experience. It is not just simply, it is listening to Spirit, it is always listening to Spirit, but talking about mass incarceration, praying, or doing any of the other things that I do on a Sunday. It started because I wanted to be the change that I wish to see in the world, so I was applying the science of my teaching to become the person that I wanted to become. And what I got to really witness is to see how true that concept of being the change you wish to see in the world really creates change. That it started when I first started going to a Center for Spiritual Living was in 2008, and I invited all my friends consistently. I was 28 or something, 27, I think, now I think about it, because it was 2008, I was like 27. So I'm asking all my friends to come with me on Sunday, and every week, everyone's got an excuse as to why they're not going to be there. And there was this one week in particular that someone said, "Are you in church this Sunday?" And I was like, you know what, I was flying somewhere. I had a job where I was flying all over the country, so my flight was on Sunday. And so I said, no, I'm not going. And something happened that morning where I realized my flight was maybe like 3, 4, something like that. I was like, oh, I have time to get to church and go to the airport. I'm going to come to church. So I went to church alone, like I always had, and lo and behold, all of my friends were there. And I was like, were y'all just waiting for me not to be here? Like, what is going on? What happened? And it just happened to be the day that all of them woke up with this feeling of, even though I said I wasn't going to go, they all felt inspired to show up, and they all just did individually. They didn't know each other would be there. So we were all just there together. And from that point forward, all of my friends leaned into the science of mind principles. One of those people is actively going through the motions of becoming a practitioner. They all just really leaned into their spiritual practice. And my decision to go to the Bodhi Spiritual Center every Sunday had nothing to do with trying to inspire or change my friends. I was showing up for myself every day and talking about the impact that this teaching had on me every day. And so from that moment forward, I've just seen a significant shift in all of the people around me. I can't name it, individually. Sometimes some of those things have been challenges, like my divorce was incredibly challenging for my family and continues to be. So, these choices that I'm making of honoring myself, honoring my truth, sometimes they have an impact on other people that I wouldn't necessarily prefer. So, I should say prefer, but people I don't know. Like, my divorce had a significant impact on my family, but all kinds of other people who I don't even know were inspired by my decision to honor what felt right for me, to have heard Oklahoma calling me, and to show up here and done it. I know someone told me a story about how they shared that story somewhere else, and that person has now blown up their life and moved to Mexico as a result of having heard it. I don't know this person from anything. And it just really demonstrates that when we live our truth, we are creating change. We don't get to be the people who decide what that change looks like. All that we need to know is we get to decide what change looks like for ourselves. And when we lean into that, when we live consciously from that, we are transforming people around us, whether we are trying to or not. Dr. Sharajan Wright also said, external work is necessary, but still insufficient, because we also need a process of healing. We need a process of healing our inner world that has been damaged, harmed, and injured by social inequality. So, this week, this theme, A New Day, one of the ministers in our movement sent an email to a minister listserv that we have, where ministers get to just have conversations, share resources, whatever it may be. And this minister said, I'm not going to use anything from this week's material because it's too political. And I said, can you tell me what I said that was political? Because I didn't say there's no shoulds. I'm speaking about Martin Luther King. And when you think about Martin Luther King Jr. as an individual, he was a political figure. Equality is political. That's not my intention, it's not my desire, and what I believe that we teach of oneness is that equality and oneness go hand in hand. So regardless of the fact that politics and equality are linked in the relative world, in what we teach in the science of mind equality and oneness go hand in hand. That spirit does not discriminate. We discriminate. And many of us, I have learned, more so post-2020, specifically the George Floyd's death really unearthed a lot, I think, in this country specifically. And some ministers say we shouldn't talk about it. And there was a conversation on the listserv about what is ours to do to talk about it. And the consensus is, what I love about the Centers for Spiritual Living, is the consensus is, you do what you want. As a minister, there's nobody saying that you have to take the material that was written and use it, regardless of whether it feels political for you. If that feels too political, if equality, the concept of equality, freedom, and justice for all, which is one of the things that she highlighted of me saying as political, if that feels political to you, don't use it. Don't talk about it. You talk about whatever you want to talk about. Nobody is judging you. Nobody is telling you this is who you need to be. This is the kind of minister you need to be. All we agree on is that the science of mind is a philosophy that we can use to apply to our own individual lives and use it however we want to use it. That's what science of mind is all about. That ignorance doesn't prevent anyone from its mistakes. The way the law works is we operate from the law of cause and effect. Every effect in our lives is the result of cause. We can ignore cause. We can pretend that it doesn't exist and only talk about science of mind from the concept of cause and effect and not talk about any of the actual causes and effects of our lives. That is a choice. Nobody is saying ministers are required to provide specific examples. But for me, what inspires me to give a message when I give messages is recognizing that I have an opportunity to remind each one of us, to one, teach us some things that we may not know. No, I don't do it in everybody take out your notebook and learn this and write this. Have an opportunity to shed light on something that people may not be aware of or may not be thinking of. But it's also a recognition of these are examples. You get to apply this understanding to whatever example resonates most with you. This is how I use it. This is what resonates with me. There's a book called it's called Atomic Metaphysics, the Electrical Principle of Man. And I'm not gonna lie, I haven't read this book. But Sarah Flowers is a Black New Thought leader whose name doesn't come up very often. When we're having conversations about Black New Thought leaders, her name comes up. And when we are talking about Black New Thought leaders, her name doesn't come up. So that's the only time I've ever heard of her. And I learned about her through Tracy Brown, is a practitioner in our movement that teaches diversity and inclusion. I took her diversity and inclusion class, so this is where I first learned about Sarah Flowers. But I did buy this book for the purpose of finding the page number to be able to quote where this quote came from that I learned about from Tracy. And in it, she says, this light, as we understand it, is electronic, and because we possess it, we can use it for the benefit of all of us. That this little light of mine that we were singing about, it's electronic. Those are the words that Sarah Flowers uses. There are many ways to describe the power of the universe that we all have access to, that we can all use, that we all are. And on Martin Luther King's birthday, I felt a responsibility to highlight a Black New Thought leader and what she has to say about the law of attraction, about how it works. I'm going to close with this quote from John Ginwright from the Four Pivots, where he says, there is no objective nor relative truth, but rather a cosmic and funky dance between both. We don't teach that in the science of mind. We don't teach about this funky dance. We say there's the objective, which is spirit, and there's the relative, which is the way we are experiencing spirit. It is the use, the application of the law of cause and effect. But what we also teach is that spirit is literally all that there is. So spirit is in the relative. Spirit is in the objective. Spirit is in the relative. And this experience of life that we are living is a cosmic and funky dance. We have an opportunity to deny or look away from the things that make us uncomfortable. We have an opportunity to shed light and love and prayer on the things that make us uncomfortable. Or we have the right to call it political and judge it and stay away from it as much as possible. Any of those choices are available to us. It is a cosmic and funky dance of life. There is no right or wrong. There's only truth. There's only love. There's only light. And that can be incredibly difficult to remember. But I'm grateful that I've chosen to show up on the vast majority of Sundays since 2008 to be a part of spiritual community that reminds me of this fact, of this truth. I'm grateful for doing the best that I can to enjoy the funky dance and know that this is what I'm here to do. I'm experiencing the challenges that I'm experiencing as a result of an inspiration, a shift that is necessary to take place in my life. Spirit's illuminating these things for me. That every experience, positive or uncomfortable, is an opportunity to recognize that Spirit is present at all times and always. So as we move forward in this new day, I invite us to start each day conscious of the fact that we are living a grand rising, to define what grand rising means for us individually, and to live intentionally from that understanding. And I would love for us to cement this together in prayer. So I invite you all to take a moment to get comfortable in your seats, settling into the present and recognizing what a gift this present moment is. That each one of us has either persevered through the cold and the snow in a place that doesn't normally experience this kind of weather, or we've tuned in online to have access to spiritual food regardless of the fact that we're not getting out of our warm, fuzzy houses. To know that wherever we are, whatever we are doing is a divine appointment. And I'm grateful to be a part of a spiritual community that teaches that every single moment is a divine appointment, that every single experience is a divine experience. And I am grateful that each one of us is navigating our own experience of a grand rising personally, perfectly, that there is no wrong way of living each day, conscious of the fact that we are having a grand rising, that we are not just waking up, that we are not just moving throughout the day, but that we are conscious and aware that each day is whatever it needs to be, that each day is truly a divine appointment and conscious of the divinity of the present, the moment, the day, the life that we are living. I'm grateful to know it, grateful to